The cold came down from the mountains before the sun had finished setting. It crossed the open Wyoming range without fence or mercy, flattening the dry grass and pushing loose snow into long white scars across the road. By dusk, the creek behind Caleb Mercer's ranch had frozen hard enough to hold a rabbit. By midnight, the wind was striking the house in steady blows, testing every board and shutter as if it meant to tear the place apart. Caleb had lived through 20 winters there. He knew which hinge would groan first. He knew where the roof leaked when snow melted too fast, and which section of fence disappeared beneath the drifts. He knew how to sleep through the chimney's low whistle and wake when a horse shifted wrong in the barn. What he did not know anymore was how to live in a house built for more than one person. The table had 6 chairs, though 5 gathered dust. 2 bedrooms stood closed at the end of the hall. Inside one was a narrow bed with a quilt folded across it. Inside the other was a wooden cradle Caleb had once shaped by hand, sanding the pine until it was smooth enough for an infant's skin. The cradle had never been used. He kept those doors shut. Every morning before daylight, Caleb lit the kitchen stove, made coffee strong enough to carry him through the cold, and ate 2 biscuits standing at the counter. He fed the horses, broke ice from the trough, and rode the fence line with his collar pulled high. By evening, he returned to silence. That was the arrangement he had made with the world. The land demanded labor. Caleb gave it labor. The house demanded nothing. He preferred it that way. On the second night of the storm, one of the barn doors came loose. Caleb spent an hour in the dark, driving new nails through the hinge, while snow gathered in his beard. When he finally stepped back into the kitchen, his fingers were stiff, and his coat was white at the shoulders. He had just placed another log in the stove when he heard something beneath the wind. 3 knocks, soft ones. Caleb stood still. The sound came again. This time, there were only 2. He took the lantern from its hook and crossed the front room. The cold pressed through the door before he opened it. A woman stood on the porch. She wore a brown wool coat, too thin for the weather. Snow clung to the dark hair escaping from beneath her bonnet. One hand held a worn carpet bag. The other rested on the shoulder of a boy who looked to be 7 or 8. Beside him stood a smaller girl, wrapped in a faded green blanket. Behind them, barely visible through the snow, was a wagon tilted into the roadside ditch. The woman's lips were pale. "Mr. Mercer?" Caleb lifted the lantern. "That's me. My name is Hannah Bell." Her voice trembled, though whether from fear or cold he could not tell. The wheel broke about a mile back. The driver said there was a ranch this direction. He went toward town for help. Caleb looked past her. There was no sign of the driver. How long ago? Near 3 hours. The boy leaned against his mother, trying not to shake. Caleb's eyes moved to the little girl. Her bare fingers were curled against the blanket. "There's a storm cellar under the old stage station," he said. "Didn't you see it? The roof had fallen in." The woman swallowed. "I would not ask for myself." The wind pushed snow across the porch between them. Hannah drew the girl closer. "Please let my children sleep here," she said. "Just until morning." Caleb looked into the house behind him. The fire burned low in the stove. The table stood empty. The hall beyond it was dark, and the closed bedroom doors waited at the far end. He stepped aside. "Bring them in." Hannah did not move at first. Perhaps she had expected another question. Perhaps she had expected a refusal. Then she guided the children across the threshold. The boy entered first, holding himself stiffly. The little girl followed, staring at Caleb with wide gray eyes. Hannah came last, and closed the door carefully, as though afraid the sound might change his mind. Caleb pointed toward the stove. "Get near the heat." The children went to it, without speaking. Hannah stayed by the door. "I can pay when we reach town. I did not ask for payment. I can cook, clean, mend something. You can take off that wet coat." Her face tightened at the plainness of his answer. Then she obeyed. The coat beneath the snow was patched at both elbows. Her dress was clean, but worn thin at the hem. She removed the children's outer clothes and spread them over 2 chairs. The boy's name was Thomas. The girl was Elsie. Caleb learned this when Hannah whispered to them, thinking he was too far away to hear. "Thomas, warm your sister's hands." The boy took Elsie's fingers between his own. Caleb opened the cupboard. He had beans from supper, half a loaf of bread, and a jar of preserved peaches he had not touched since summer. He set everything on the table. Hannah watched him. "You should keep your stores. There's more in the cellar." It was not true about the peaches. There were no more peaches. He heated the beans and cut the bread into thick slices. Thomas ate slowly at first, then faster. Elsie held her spoon with both hands. Hannah broke her bread in half and slid part of it onto her daughter's plate. Caleb placed another slice beside her. "I have enough," Hannah said. "You gave yours away." She looked at him, then lowered her eyes. After the meal, Caleb carried blankets into the front room. "You can sleep by the stove. The children will be grateful. All 3 of you." Hannah glanced toward the hallway. "We will be gone when the wagon is repaired." Caleb did not answer. He checked the latch on the front door, banked the fire, and went to his room. But he did not sleep. Through the wall, he heard the faint movements of strangers settling beneath his roof. A child coughed. A floorboard creaked. Hannah murmured something too quiet to understand. The house, empty for so long, seemed to be listening with him. Morning did not bring clear weather. The storm thickened. Snow reached the lower porch step, and the road vanished beneath it. No wagon driver appeared. No rider came from town. Caleb found Hannah, already awake, kneeling beside the stove. She had rekindled the fire and was mixing flour in a bowl. "I found lard in the pantry," she said. "I hope you do not mind." Caleb looked at the dough beneath her hands. "I mind badly made biscuits." Thomas stared at him. For a moment, Caleb thought the boy was frightened. Then one corner of the boy's mouth lifted. The biscuits were good. After breakfast, Caleb went to the barn. When he returned, Hannah had swept the front room and folded the blankets into a neat stack. Thomas was carrying wood from the box beside the door. Elsie sat beneath the window, arranging dried beans into careful rows on the floor. Caleb removed his gloves. "You don't have to work." Hannah kept sweeping. "I know." By noon, the wind had covered Caleb's tracks between the house and barn. He told Hannah the road might remain blocked for 2 days. She nodded once. "We will not be trouble." Caleb had heard promises like that before. Every promise came from someone who did not yet understand trouble. But the children were quiet. Hannah used little water, little food, and less space than seemed possible. She kept their belongings inside the carpet bag and slept sitting upright so the children could stretch beside the fire. On the second night, Caleb opened the bedroom at the far end of the hall. Dust rested on the dresser. The quilt had faded where a thin blade of sunlight reached it each afternoon. Hannah stood behind him. "The children can use this room," he said. She did not step forward. "This belongs to someone. It's empty." "That is not what I said." Caleb's hand tightened around the lantern. "My wife chose the curtains." Hannah waited. "She died before we could fill the room." He did not tell her more. He did not tell her about the fever that had taken Ruth in 3 days. He did not speak of the doctor arriving too late, or the tiny clothes she had sewn during the months when they believed a child was coming. He only placed the lantern on the dresser. "The blankets are clean." That night, Thomas and Elsie slept in the bed. Hannah remained on the floor beside them. The storm passed on the 4th morning. The sky opened hard and blue, leaving the range buried beneath a bright, frozen silence. Caleb found the wagon driver at noon. The man had reached an abandoned cattle shed before the worst of the storm, and survived with frostbitten fingers. The wagon's broken wheel could not be repaired until a replacement came from town. Hannah received the news without complaint. How long? Maybe a week. She looked toward her children. who were brushing snow from the porch rail with a broom. "I will work for the meals." Caleb leaned against the kitchen doorway. "There is work enough." So Hannah stayed. The first week became 2. The wheel arrived, but the wagon's rear axle had split. The driver left for town again, promising to return with a blacksmith. By then, Hannah had learned where Caleb kept the coffee, and which hen hid her eggs beneath the feed trough. She patched a tear in his winter coat, without asking. He discovered the repair one morning, when his fingers touched a line of careful stitches near the pocket. Thomas began following Caleb to the barn. The boy asked few questions, but he watched everything. Caleb showed him how to hold a currycomb flat against a horse's side. Thomas learned to approach from the shoulder and speak before touching the animal. "Horse needs to know you are there," Caleb said. Thomas nodded. The next morning, Caleb found him whispering good morning to every horse in the barn. Elsie followed Hannah through the house, carrying clothespins or spoons or whatever small object made her feel useful. She had a habit of falling asleep in strange places. Once Caleb found her curled inside the empty wood box with her cheek against a piece of burlap. He carried her to the bed. She woke as he lowered her onto the quilt. "Are we leaving tomorrow?" "I don't know. Do you want us to?" Caleb pulled the blanket to her chin. "Go back to sleep." The days found a rhythm. Hannah rose before Caleb, but never took his place at the stove. She left the kettle ready, and the wood stacked beside it. Caleb poured coffee for both of them. Thomas gathered eggs. Elsie fed crumbs to the smallest chickens. Hannah washed clothes on Mondays and baked bread on Thursdays. Caleb repaired the loose leg on her carpet bag. He did it in the barn at night, using a strip of oak and 2 small brass screws. In the morning, he set it beside the front door. Hannah ran her thumb across the repair. "Thank you." Caleb nodded. That was all. By February, the children's voices no longer sounded strange in the house. Thomas carved animals from scraps of pine. Elsie drew pictures with bits of charcoal. Hannah placed the pictures on the pantry wall, where Ruth's old shopping lists had once hung. Caleb noticed, but he did not remove them. One evening, Thomas left a wooden horse beside Caleb's coffee cup. The legs were uneven, and the neck was too long. Caleb carried it in his coat pocket for 3 days. When the weather softened, Hannah asked Caleb to take them into town. "The wagon driver is not coming back," she said. Caleb knew she was right. The man had taken another route south after his hands healed. The ruined wagon remained in the ditch, half buried in snow. "Where will you go?" "There is a boarding house near the church." "With what money?" "I will find work." Caleb looked through the window. Thomas was holding a fence post steady, while Elsie packed snow around its base. "You have work here." Hannah folded her hands. "For how long?" Caleb had no answer ready. The quiet between them became uncomfortable. Hannah looked away first. "We will stay through the thaw," she said. "Then I will make other arrangements." Caleb told himself that was sensible. Spring came slowly. The snow sank into the earth. The creek broke loose with a grinding sound that carried through the valley. Mud swallowed wagon wheels, and green shoots pushed through the brown grass. Hannah planted onions beside the house. Caleb built a fence around the patch to keep rabbits out. Neither mentioned summer. Then a rider came from town. He arrived in a dark coat, riding a fine bay mare, unsuited to muddy roads. His name was Silas Reed, and he carried a leather case beneath his arm. Hannah went still when she saw him. Caleb noticed. Silas removed his hat. "Mrs. Bell." Hannah stood on the porch with Elsie behind her. "You found us. You left a trail of unpaid obligations." Caleb stepped out of the barn. Silas looked him over. "And you are?" "The man whose land you're standing on." Silas smiled without warmth. He explained that Hannah's late husband had borrowed money against their home in Nebraska. When he died, the debt remained. Silas had purchased the note. "The house is gone," Hannah said. "You took it." "The house covered only part. There was nothing else." "There are the children." Caleb's expression changed. Silas lifted one hand. "Not as payment. Do not misunderstand me. Their grandfather has offered to assume the remaining debt if they are placed in his care. Hannah's face lost what little color it had. He has never met them. He has land, money, a proper household. He refused to help when their father was sick. That is family business. Caleb moved closer. It became my business when you rode onto my property. Silas closed the leather case. You may house Mrs. Bell if you like, but the children belong with blood relations, and their grandfather intends to petition the territorial court. Hannah gripped the porch railing. Silas mounted his horse. You have 10 days to come willingly. After that, the sheriff will accompany me. When he was gone, Thomas stepped from behind the barn. He had heard everything. That night, no one ate much. Hannah packed the carpet bag. Caleb watched from the kitchen doorway. What are you doing? Leaving before they bring the sheriff here. Leaving won't stop them. I can take the children north. In mud season? With no horse? I will find a way. Caleb stepped into the room. And when Elsie gets sick on the road? Hannah pulled a dress from the dresser and folded it too quickly. Do not tell me what I cannot do. I'm telling you what the land will do. She stopped. Caleb lowered his voice. You came to this house half frozen. You asked me to let your children sleep here. I opened the door. I won't close it, because a man carries papers. Hannah's eyes shone, but no tears fell. You do not understand. Their grandfather has influence. Then we'll need more than anger. The next morning, Caleb rode to town. He spoke with the sheriff, the preacher, and a lawyer who worked from the back room of the feed store. He learned that Hannah's husband had signed the loan, but Hannah had not. He learned Silas had no legal claim over the children, and that their grandfather's petition could be challenged if Hannah had steady work and a safe home. The lawyer tapped the desk. Does she? Caleb looked down at his weathered hands. She does now. He signed a statement, declaring Hannah Bell the paid housekeeper and manager of his household, with wages, lodging, and permanent provision for her children. Then he returned to the ranch. Silas came on the 10th day with the sheriff and another man in a black town coat. Hannah stood on the porch. Thomas held her hand. Elsie pressed against her skirt. Caleb waited at the gate. Silas opened his case. The petition has been filed. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Before Silas could continue, Caleb handed him the lawyer's document. Silas read it. This proves employment, nothing more. It proves she has work and a home belonging to an unrelated man. Caleb looked toward Hannah. For weeks, he had feared the question she had asked him. For how long? He had avoided the answer, because answers became promises, and promises gave the world something it could break. Now Thomas stood pale beside his mother. Elsie's small fingers were tangled in Hannah's dress. The front door behind them stood open, showing the table, the stove, and the charcoal drawings on the pantry wall. Caleb faced the sheriff. They are not passing through. Hannah stared at him. Caleb continued. The children have beds here. Their mother has work. Their names are in my household record, witnessed in town this morning. Silas folded the document. You cannot simply declare strangers a family. No, Caleb said. You prove it by staying. The sheriff read the paper for himself. After a long moment, he handed it back. I see no cause to remove the children today. Silas's jaw tightened. The court will hear this. Then the court can hear it, Caleb said. The men rode away. Hannah remained on the porch. Thomas took Elsie inside, leaving the two adults beneath the pale spring sky. Caleb walked toward the steps. Hannah held the employment paper in both hands. You wrote permanent. I did. You did not ask me. I'm asking now. The wind moved through the new grass. Caleb looked past her into the house he had kept empty for 20 years. I don't know how to say this well. Then say it plainly. He nodded. I want you to stay. Hannah waited. The children too, he added, not as guests. Her fingers tightened around the paper. For how long? Caleb met her eyes. As long as you choose. Hannah looked toward the open door. Inside, Thomas was setting 4 bowls on the table. Elsie stood on a chair, trying to reach the loaf of bread. "We have nowhere else," Hannah whispered. Caleb shook his head. "That is not why I'm asking." She studied his face, as if searching for pity. There was none. Only a tired man standing before an open house, finally admitting it had been empty long enough. Hannah breathed in slowly. "Then we will stay." Summer settled over the ranch. The onion patch grew thick and green. Thomas learned to ride the old gray mare. Elsie painted the repaired wood box yellow and filled it with wildflowers instead of firewood. Hannah moved the cradle from the closed room into the attic. She asked Caleb first. He told her it was time. By autumn, the house no longer carried silence from room to room. Boots gathered beside the door. Coats hung from every peg. A crooked wooden horse stood on the mantel. One cold evening, Caleb returned from the barn and found Elsie asleep at the table. Thomas was reading beside the stove. Hannah was mending a shirt beneath the lamplight. 4 bowls waited for supper. Caleb closed the door against the wind. Hannah looked up. "You're late. A calf broke through the lower fence. Is it safe?" "It is now." She placed his repaired shirt beside his chair. Caleb sat down. Thomas passed him the bread without being asked. Elsie stirred, opened her eyes, and smiled when she saw him. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall across the dark range. Inside, every chair at the table was warm.